Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. We are midway through the 2034 season. It's been an excellent campaign for the Royals, 55-28 record, best record in baseball. We recently completed the starting a charity storyline, so our fan interest and fan loyalty are both as good as they've ever been. Unfortunately, the cost on that does mean that we don't have any money to take on contracts right now, so that's not optimal given that we are playing to win it all this year, and we do feel like we have a hole or two in our bullpen. One thing that I think I'm going to do, and this is just me being kind of schizophrenic at this point, but we had signed Gordon Graceffo to a $4 million extension for next year a few months ago, and we thought that was potentially a really good thing. But his stuff and his pitches are honestly deteriorating pretty quickly. You can see we've got him having gone over the last less than a year. He's gone from 55 to 40 with his stuff. Still have him at 60 movement and 60 control, but I guess the question with him is, since we are under a little bit of pressure money-wise, and the fact that our new first-year manager, Bobby Crosby, has moved Graceffo out of the rotation for Tyler Bosma, I think I may just put Graceffo on the block. Don't necessarily want to trade him, but if someone's willing to make an offer for him, especially given that he is signed for next year to a pretty reasonable contract, we'd be willing to think about moving on from him. Going to do the same thing with Zach Green, the Rule 5 acquisition that we picked up. He's been okay, 4.31 ERA over 39 and two-thirds innings. And then R.J. Dabovich is in the final year of his contract. He's been solid for us like he always is. You look at the career that he's put together for Kansas City. He's been here over a decade now and been a real consistent middle reliever. Career ERA of 3.04, 2.97 Sierra, 139 ERA plus, 82 FIP minus, in 3 All-Star appearances and 2 World Series championships. But he's not in our long-term plans, so we probably won't be signing him after this season, so we'll put him on the block also. Don't necessarily think that anyone's going to really go crazy trying to pick up any of those players, but if someone really wants him, it'll give us a little bit of flexibility. Billy Dominguez is going to do the same thing with him. There could be some interest in him. He is a 25-year-old, less than a year of major league experience, so making the major league minimum. Pretty versatile, can play second, third, short if you had to. Acceptable hitter. Getting his first major league experience this year where he's hit 213 and 47 at-bats. But he's certainly not a long-term member of this team for us. So if there's someone really interested in him, we'll have him out there for the next month and see what happens. We did at the end of the last episode make a $5 million offer to the center fielder Gilberto Ramiro as our potential international amateur free agent signing. Like the potential for excellent contact and home run power. Love the personality. Love the durability. Only 16 years old, so there's definitely some upside with him. He's listed as a center fielder. He's not a center fielder. You could play him in left or right. You don't love that outfield error rating, but, it's a corner outfielder. I don't think it's going to be the end of the world one way or the other. And then you look at his infield ratings, and you could play him at third base or first base if you had to. You wouldn't love it. I guess at first he'd probably be pretty solid. He is 6'1". You could play him at second if you had to, but that is definitely not optimal with the low error and turn double play ratings for him. So he's a corner infielder, corner outfielder, but if he develops close to 80 contact and close to 80 home run power, you'll be able to find a spot for him in any lineup. And I also mentioned at the end of the last episode that I wanted to ensure that Willie Flores was getting more at-bats. So what I did is put Flores into the lineup at first base against right-handers to take over for Rich Alvarado. Alvarado is another young guy, 25 years old, hitting 250 this year. He did hit 285 last year in 417 at-bats. Doesn't have a ton of home run power, so he's probably not your prototypical first baseman. Like having him on the team, and Alvarado is going to still continue to start against left-handers, but just feel that Flores, with his defensive versatility and I think potentially a little more home run power, a little more gap power than Alvarado, although he probably not quite as good a contact hitter. Another nice personality, just with the fact that he's better and more versatile defensively. Want to make sure that Flores, who has only had 174 at-bats this year, gets, hopefully another 250 over the second half of the year to be over 400 at-bats when all is said and done, to hopefully continue the development that he needs to go, moving in the right direction. So we're going to force start him at first base and get him up the curve on another position real quickly. And then we're also going to play Flores as second base against left fielders. A little less playing time for Arrighetto Laziosi, but Laziosi will still be our backup at third base and shortstop against left-handers, playing regularly against righties. Hopefully we can get him close to 450, 500 at-bats again this year by the end of the season. And if you look at his ratings, it looks like, as far as we're concerned, he's pretty fully developed anyways. So just want to make sure that Flores in particular, since both Alvarado and Laziosi look like they're basically fully developed, want to get some extra at-bats to Flores over the second half of the year to continue his development. And then the last of the crew of young infielders, Tony Fonseca, looks completely developed, brilliant defensively. If he's a 260 hitter, he's a pretty valuable player for us, especially given that durability. And some good news, Gilberto Romero signed with us, so we got our number one choice of the international amateur free agents. Don't know if he was the right guy, but he was our guy, so real happy to have him on the team now in the international complex. Ishmael Zavala, who you may remember, was kind of the fifth outfielder we had up this year, and we did send him down to Omaha so he could get a little more playing time. Just one player of the week down there, hit it 520 for the week, scored 9 runs, so a monster week for Zavala. Honestly, with the profile that he has, he's going to have a tough time getting back to the majors, quite honestly. And I think he's a very fine profile for a fifth outfielder. The issue that Zavala is going to have, and maybe he's a player that we should also put on the trade block, is that when we look at AAA, Mike McNeil, another one of the top young prospects in our system, was our supplemental first-round choice in 2032, so just about 2 years ago. I can't remember whether that was the Spencer Bauer supplemental pick or whether that was the year after Bauer left us. But regardless, he's been in the system about 2 years, and he is hitting .341 in AAA this year with 15 homers and 276 at-bats. You can see he profiles as a better offensive player than Zavala. He's played left and right, pretty experienced at those. We could probably play him at center a little bit over the course of this season. I think he's probably going to be a 35 or 40 ability to play the position in terms of center field with those ratings, but still wouldn't be bad to have him equipped to play that position, and really no room for him in the infield. He's a pure outfielder. At 6'3", I guess we could put him at first, but with that range and error rating, just not a good situation. But with Mike McNeil on the way, Zavala's future could definitely be in doubt, because then when you go down to AA, we've got Jerry Terrell and Israel Gutierrez, and then in single A, we've got Jorge Lebron and Bobby Cintrone and Jimmy Fowlo as some of the prominent players in our system who are coming up as potential outfielders. So as I think about this a little more, I don't know that there's going to be a ton of interest in Zavala, but I'm going to put him on the block also just in case anyone is looking for a younger outfielder, because even with the potential departure of Dylan Cruz this coming season, you look at our outfield, Avelar is probably going to win Rookie of the Year. He'll be back. Soto will be back as our fourth outfielder. Velasquez will be back as our center fielder. And Alex Vasquez will be back in left field. So if we bring up McNeil, would like to think that he, Vasquez, and Avelar, between them, will have the two corner positions and designated hitter covered. I guess maybe there's room for Zavala as a fifth outfielder again next year. But if someone's really interested in him and they're willing to make us a big offer for him, we probably would want to think about moving on from him. And as I'm thinking about the trade block, another player that I'm going to put on it is Alfredo Mena, pretty solid 23-year-old shortstop. He's really more of a excellent second baseman, very good third baseman, acceptable shortstop. Doesn't have quite as good a hitting profile as most of the young guys who are 2-3 years older than him that we brought up to the majors over the last year or two. He was a former second-round pick of ours in 2032. Honestly, that was the same draft that we got McNeil in, so it's looking like that was a pretty good draft for us so far. We're going to put him on the trade block also. Don't necessarily want to get rid of him, but with that profile, there could be someone interested in him, and maybe we'll get a offer of a pitcher with some upside for him. Eventually, we're probably going to have to move on from among Fonseca, Flores, Laziosi, and Alvarado. Probably going to want to move on from one of them over the next couple of years, because I just don't know that we want to be in a position where all four of them are potentially hitting free agency at the same time. That could potentially really decimate our entire infield in the same year. So from that perspective, keeping around somebody like Mena, who's on a little bit of a different arbitration schedule than those three, might not be the worst thing in the world. But, we've got a few years to cross that bridge and figure out exactly what we want to do with all of the young talent that we have. But at this point, it's kind of interesting. I feel like we got a lot of good young players coming along, but supposedly we are still ranked 22nd after trading away one of the top prospects in the game this past offseason to bring on some pitching help. And we were just talking about Mike McNeil down in Omaha, and he actually just won Player of the Week down there, 11 for 23 with 5 home runs. So he's making a strong case to be a September call-up, quite honestly. He's got a little work to do on his contact and his home run power and his avoiding Ks, but he's certainly ready to be a major league hitter at this point already, I think. Got the batting average up to 351 with 20 homers and 299 at-bats. So he is knocking on the door and going to be here soon. Before we think about him further, though, let's see the All-Star Game rosters. How many All-Stars do we have? Ben Borgman, not a shocker, 11-3 record, 2.59 ERA. He has been an All-Star for us each of the last 3 years. Been a really big acquisition that we made from Colorado, and then we decided to sign him as a free agent to a big contract, and he's been the number one pitcher in our rotation. So good to see Borgman back in the All-Star game. Tyler Bosma, who we talked about a little earlier, filling in as our 5th starter now since he moved Graceffo out of the rotation, was our closer at the start of the year. 8-2 record, 14 saves, 2.14 ERA. Not a shock to see Bosma get his first All-Star honors at 34 years old. So longtime Royal, and we have a team option for $3.6 million for him next year. kind of got off to a bit of a slow start in his career. You can see he was up in 2026. Then we didn't even have him up at all in 2027. But since then, he's been a mainstay either in the rotation or as a closer for us. And this year, where he's splitting time between the rotation and as a closer. So nice to see Tyler Bosma with the first All-Star honors of his career. And that is it for the pitchers. Looking at the position players, Bobby Witt Jr., not a surprise. Perennial All-Star, perennial Gold Glove winner, hitting .294 with 14 homers and 51 runs batted in here in this season. Dylan Cruz, who is probably in his last year with us, making $24 million, and he's looking for an extension at about that amount, with guys like McNeil potentially coming up next year, and with the rookie we have in the outfield in Aviar and the way he's hitting this year, we can definitely get younger and hopefully have pretty similar production to what we got from Cruz, who's hitting .279, 15 homers, 49 ribbies. First time he's an all-star since that great 2031 season he had with the Red Sox, after which we made a big trade for him. And then the last all-star for the Royals, not surprisingly, Alex Vasquez, has been an all-star every year of his career, hitting .340 this year with 18 homers and 66 ribbies as our left fielder. So only 2 pitchers on the all-star team and 3 position players on the all-star team for the Kansas City Royals here in 2034. And we've now moved ahead to the first-year player draft, and Kansas City picking 32nd is just a reminder that we had the best record in baseball last year and then flamed out in the first round of the playoffs. It is kind of annoying to see the Angels, who knocked us out of the playoffs and then went on to win the World Series championship, picking 8 spots ahead of us, but it is what it is. That's the way it works. We do not have a supplemental first-round pick this year, but we do have a supplemental pick in the second round. That was for the departure of Zach Jacobs, who longtime member of our rotation, who we didn't end up signing to an extension. We thought he was actually going to go for more money than he ended up signing for. In retrospect, if we could have signed him for about $11 million a year, which is what he went to the A's for, we probably would have brought him back. But market didn't develop the way that he had hoped, and he's having another good year for the A's this year. 3.19 ERA and a 7-3 record over 98 2/3 innings. So he kind of started having this renaissance in his 30s, where he's been, a somewhat more productive pitcher over the last 3 seasons than he was over the early stage. That's not really fair to say. I mean, he did lead the league in ERA for the first time with us, and his ERAs the last 3 years are generally better than some of those other years that he had. But he had been a pretty solid pitcher for the Royals over the years. In retrospect, for about the same money, would much rather have him than Ben Borgman at the $10 million or not Ben Borgman. We would not rather have Jacobs than Ben Borgman. I'm thinking of these players with alliteration in their names. Gordon Graceffo is the one who we exercised a $10 million option on for this season. At the time, Jacobs was saying he wanted about $20 million a year. So we went ahead and exercised the $10 million a year option that we had on Graceffo and let Jacobs go. Clearly, if we had known that we would have been able to get the younger and more effective Jacobs for about the same kind of money, we would have went that way, but did not work out. So we're going to be waiting a while till our first pick, but as I mentioned, then we've got 2 second-rounders. I promise I will not go into the excruciating detail on the video this year that I went in July of 2033 when I ended up releasing a video that was about 2 hours long. Appreciate anyone who sat through that. For those of you who were looking to use it to help fall asleep, I hope it was helpful in my dulcet tones helping you fall asleep at night if that's what you used it for. But we'll not go into as much detail this year, so hopefully this won't be a 2-hour episode when all is said and done. And we've made it through the draft to the pick for the Royals. You can see, at least according to our scout, there's 7 4-star potential players who are still here right at the end of the first round. So certainly could be in a worse position than that. It did look like it was a relatively deep draft when we had been doing our scouting. So I'm just going to take a look for the video at these top 4-star players, see what the scouting director recommends, and then probably do some more work that I won't subject you all to me thinking about, and then make a decision. So left fielder Jose Cuevas, average competition level, almost 19 years old, certainly profiles as an above average offensive player, decent speed, don't love the low leadership, definitely a corner outfielder. Looks like he's got ratings for first and second also. Yeah, you could play him at first or second if you had to, although he's 5'10", so you really wouldn't want to play him at first. With a 50 range, 50 error, 45 turning double play, you really wouldn't want to play him at second either, but you could if you had to. I'd say he's a solid, respectable bat. He does have a pretty low bonus for someone at the end of the first round, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Decent prospect. I would hope we can find someone a little more interesting than him. Catcher Angel Echeverria. Bad personality with the poor work ethic, decent catcher ability. He's got some pop to his bat. He's already 21 years old, goes to Texas Tech. Don't love him as a prospect. Don't hate him either. I'd like to get more than a mediocre defensive catcher who doesn't work all that hard and is kind of a average-ish bat with a little pop if everything works out. Hopefully we can do better than that. Center fielder Michael Fuller, another high school player. He's faced a good competition level, bonus demand not out of control, has some speed, could definitely play center field, could play left very well. You could put him in right, but you don't love the arm, but pretty versatile defensively. Don't want to play him anywhere in the infield, although he does have first base ratings because he's 6'4". And a pretty solid batting profile. He's an interesting prospect. I like him more than Echevarria. Right now it would be Cuevas or Fuller for me. Manuel Johnson, another center fielder. Little older, almost 22 years old. He's in college, a lot further along in terms of his development. Still profiles as an above-average offensive player. Could be a very good defensive center fielder, an excellent left fielder. Again, right, you just don't love the arm, but he could still certainly play there. So he's an interesting prospect also. Left fielder Jonathan Ojeda. He's a left fielder or right fielder, like the high work ethic, like that he's durable. Another college player who's very, almost fully developed. He's almost ready to go right into the majors, given that we've got such a group of young outfielders right now in the majors or kind of on the way in the majors. Although I like his bat and that home run power, I almost think I might be inclined to take someone who's a little younger just to give us a little flexibility rather than having all of these corner outfielders hitting the major leagues at the same time. Closer Alex Perez, good personality, good durability, college pitcher. Looks like he's going to have a filthy fastball, a really good slider, excellent stuff, excellent movement. If he develops his control, could be a very good relief pitcher, but probably not going to take a reliever at this point in the first round. There is a starting pitcher prospect in Jose Sanchez. Like the work ethic. He's not even 18 years old yet. Normal injury proneness. He's got to develop all 3 of those pitches to be a starter, and he's got a lot of work to do on that changeup. If he develops that change, he's got 3 well above average pitches, really good control, good movement, decent stuff. He's not a horrible prospect. My issue with him is that if that changeup doesn't develop, he's a high-end reliever, but still a reliever. So that's kind of a quick look at the the 7 guys that our scout thinks have 4-star potential. Let's see what Travis Lee recommends. He recommends Jonathan Ojeda, who was the one guy I was like, yeah, I really like him, but I just don't know that we need another corner outfielder who's going to be ready for the majors possibly by the end of this year. I guess we'd probably start him out in Double-A, but with that profile, I think he'd plow through Double-A pretty quickly, move him up to Triple-A, and then maybe you have him up in September. And given that we already in Triple-A have Zavala, who's a major league player, Mike McNeil, who's hitting like he's going to be a major league player immediately. And then we haven't even talked about Daniel Smith, who's more kind of a DH. He's only hitting 263, not as much power this year as he had last year in Omaha. Actually, a similar amount of power, I should say. He's only got half the at-bat, so that's kind of why he's got half the home runs. But a decent contact hitting prospect who doesn't strike out much. And then I mentioned all of the kind of other outfielders that we have in high A ball and Double-A ball. Interesting. I agree that Ojeda is a really almost major league ready, if not already major league ready type of prospect. Love the durability. Like that you could have this guy in the majors at 21 years old. It's an interesting thought. I mean, it would certainly give us a lot of insurance and would guarantee that we were going to move on from Dylan Cruz at the end of this year. Because if we brought up Ojeda, I just look at our outfield and we just don't need him, though. As I mentioned, we've got Avillar and Vasquez as corner outfielders. We've got Velasquez in center field. We've got Soto as our backup outfielder who can play all the different positions. And we're going to have Mike McNeil up next year as another corner outfielder / DH, plus potentially Zavala on the way. I like him as a prospect. I really do. I just don't know whether he's the guy that we should draft this year. And I have made my decision. And it came down to 3 players. I really like to go with pitching, as you know. A 17-year-old pitcher with nothing but upside is always tempting to me, especially when he's got a great work ethic. But I just think the risk of Jose Sanchez becoming a reliever if he doesn't develop that changeup and really just his 2 pitches is too high. Might regret not picking him because I always love to go with a pitcher when I can, but I just think there's too much risk with Jose Sanchez and that changeup. If he had a 4th pitch that he was working on, even if it was also 20 out of 60 or something, I would go with him in a second. There's just too much risk that he becomes a pretty expensive reliever, in my opinion. So the second player it came down to was the 18-year-old center fielder Michael Fuller. Like the fact that he's faced good competition, like the fact that he's a high schooler, very good defensive potential player, has some speed, and could be a plus hitter. So it was hard for me to move on from Fuller because, as I talked about, kind of wanted someone who's a little bit younger, not going to be ready for the outfield in a couple years if I did go with an outfielder. But I ultimately decided against Fuller. And we are going to go with Jonathan Ojeda, who is the guy that our scout recommended and the guy that I was talking about I didn't necessarily want right now because I didn't necessarily want another corner outfielder. But as I thought about it and looked at him a little deeper, he can play first base. He's 6'6", doesn't have great range, error, or arm, but with that size, he can be competent at first base and obviously can play right field, left field, or DH. But you look at his batting ratings, and he's basically ready for the majors right now, according to our scout. You look at what the OSA thinks, and they think he's even got stupider home run power potential and pretty good contact potential. They like him even more than we do. But with that work ethic and with where we think his ratings are right now, he's basically a ready-made above average major league hitter that's dropped into our laps with the final pick of the first round. He's durable. I tried to talk myself out of it by saying that he's only hitting .282 at Duke, but he's been up against a great level of competition at Duke, and even with the .282 batting average, he has 16 homers and 206 at-bats. I've talked a little bit about how we're probably going to need to move on from one of the 4 young infielders that we do have. And with the fact that he could play first base, that could make it a little easier to potentially move on from Rich Alvarado, who has been solid for us so far. Love the work ethic with him also, but just doesn't have the home run power that we would normally want from a first baseman, and is not such a great contact hitter that he could play there. You know, if he had 70 speed and 70 base running, and you know, he could make more use of that gap power, he might be more interesting to us. But I'm almost thinking that it might make it a little easier for us to move on from Alvarado and kind of build around Flores, Laziosi, and Fonseca as the 3 young infielders, if we do bring on someone like Ojeda, who could conceivably be our starting first baseman by next year. So we are going to go ahead and follow what our scout originally suggested. Thank you, Travis Lee. You were wiser than we were. And we are going to go with the big switch-hitting left fielder / first baseman from Duke, Jonathan Ojeda, in the first round. And we've simmed ahead here to the second round now. One of the 4-star prospects, Jose Cuevas, is still around. It might be hard for us to let him go by. You know, didn't necessarily love him when he was there before. He's definitely a corner outfield, pretty mediocre infielder, but you could play him there. He's got some speed, and he potentially can develop into a plus bat. OSA likes him about similarly to the way we do. I haven't spent a lot of time looking at some of these other guys. I guess for quick talk, we'll talk through the 2 3.5-star prospects. Catcher Jaden Humphrey, 18-year-old high schooler, normal injury proneness, good defensive ability, acceptable-ish arm. Looks like he could be a average-ish major league hitter if he completely develops. So he could be a competent starting catcher in a best-case scenario, would be an excellent backup catcher, I think. So some value there at the end of the second round. And then Ishmael Vasquez, a center field prospect, 18-year-old, like the work ethic, not a ton of adaptability, so can't change positions, you know, maybe all that efficiently. With those ratings, you know, he's probably a left fielder. You could play him in center or right if you had to. Wouldn't love doing it. He's 6'3". You could play him at first base. Can't really play him anywhere else in the infield, but you could play him at first base if you had to. And certainly profiles as someone who could be a above average major league hitter. He is looking for a lot of money, $6.5 million. That's probably why he's still around at this point, because is a second round pick. $6.5 million is a lot more than you want to be paying someone who's a late second rounder. Travis Lee suggests that we go with Randy Pineda, starting pitcher, high schooler. I disagree with that. He's a reliever, and he's potentially a solid reliever, but I am definitely not going with a reliever with our first pick in the second round. So as much as I appreciate what Travis Lee suggested in the first round and how he eventually got me around on Ojeda, I'm not going to be going with Randy Pineda here in the second round. And with our first pick in the second round, I'm going to go with Jose Cuevas. Like the potential in his bat, for a late second round pick. He's a corner outfielder. As we talked about earlier, you could play him at first or third if you had to. Or first or second or third. He's got a lot of versatility defensively, but being 5'10", you don't even love him at first. But you can basically play him anywhere except center field or shortstop. You're not going to love him at any of those positions, but he is competent, I would say. So a lot of versatility defensively, although he's not that great defensively. But I like the bat. So we're going to go ahead and bring on Cuevas. I was definitely intrigued by Ishmael Vasquez, but the bonus demand is tough. I will say, though, that Ojeda was a pretty low contract. Cuevas is not going to be excessive. If we keep going cheap and Vasquez keeps sliding, it might be worth taking a flyer on him, maybe at the end of the third round if he's still around, and just hope that we can squeeze in the money needed to sign him. It's going to be real tight, particularly with the fact that we did just start that charity, which cost us a lot of money, which we could really use right now. But we're going to go with Cuevas here in the second round. Moving on to our supplemental second rounder. You can see pretty much all the same people out there because it was just a couple picks away. Scouting director recommends Jaden Humphrey, the catcher that we had talked about earlier. Not a horrible prospect. Like I said, he looks like he could be a solid starter if he fully develops, and would be an excellent backup with the fact that he's got a decent bat and pretty good catcher ability. I just don't know if there's something better out there than a backup catcher at this point in the draft. I'm not going to lie, I am tempted by Ishmael Vasquez here. It's just the $6.5 million that he's looking for I know is going to be a problem, especially this year for us after we put ourselves in a position where we're really cash-strapped right now. We would probably have to trade away a player who's making decent money this year to be able to come up with the money that we're going to need to sign him. But I do like him as a prospect for late second round of the draft. I've been going back and forth on three pitchers. I don't love any of them. Danny Bracamonte, like the fact that he's durable, just turned 18 years old. Should have a more than adequate fork, ball, and knuckle curve. His fastball will be acceptable. He's going to be a three-pitch pitcher because it doesn't seem like that changeup's going to likely turn into anything. Doesn't have a ton of stamina, so I don't love that as a potential starter for us. He is already throwing in the low to mid-90s, though. He's a lefty. He's kind of the most interesting, I think, to me. Danny Winters, I love the fact that he's got a 5-pitch arsenal, even though none of those pitches look like they're going to be all that great. Still a lot of versatility. But he's 22 years old. He's already fragile. He profiles as a back-end arm. He is also a lefty. And then Alex Zubiate is the one that I'm least interested in. Don't love the fact that he's got pretty low movement and not a ton of potential there. And similar to the guy that we thought about taking in the first round, if that changeup doesn't develop, he's a reliever with only 2 pitches. So I don't love any of the pitching prospects. On the batting side, was definitely tempted by Jaden Humphrey, the catcher that Scout recommended, and definitely tempted by Ishmael Vasquez, who's probably the best player out there, just looking for a crazy amount of money. But who we're going to go with is a younger player that's got some pretty interesting batting potential. If I can find him. Here we go. Jose Montanez. Looks like he could have plus contact, gap power, and slightly above average home run power. Got the good work ethic we look for in a player. I don't love the fact that he doesn't really have a defensive position. He's listed as a second baseman, but you wouldn't feel good about playing him at second or third, but you could. He's 6 foot tall, so you could play him at first. I just think he's likely to develop into a useful major league bat, and he's not looking for a crazy amount of money. If one of those pitchers is around in the third round, or if Vasquez is around in the third round, or quite honestly, if the catcher is around in the third round, I think I would go with any of them. But I think that Montanez is probably one of the lowest risk prospects out of them, with that strong work ethic, with a batting profile that looks like he could be a pretty useful bat. Don't love the fact that he's, kind of a Rich Alvarado in a best case scenario, who we've been talking about as a guy that we might want to get rid of because I just don't really have a position for him, and he doesn't quite hit with enough power to be a first baseman. So I think that's definitely the counterpoint to bringing him on board. But I'm going to do it and go with Jose Montanez here with our supplemental pick in the second round. Moving on to the third round, you can see Vasquez is still out there. Let's take a look at the entire universe of players that's out there. And Jaden Humphrey, the catcher, is still out there too. Wow, glad we didn't take either of them. Now we've got an option to go after either of them. I would assume that Jaden Humphrey is still Travis Lee's recommendation. Yeah. Interesting. Actually, 4 of the 5 guys we were thinking about are still out here a whole round later, which is kind of crazy. Zubiate, the starting pitcher we like the least. Bracamonte, the starting pitcher we like the most, but we still didn't love. Vasquez, whose bat we love. And then Jaden Humphrey, who could be a starting catcher, would definitely be a very good backup catcher. But I got to go with the talent. Ishmael Vasquez here in the third round. As I mentioned, we probably need to trade away somebody who's making a decent amount of money to be able to get him signed, which is not optimal. But as a third rounder, if we don't sign him, we'll get a replacement pick next year. I just think he is the most talented hitter left and the most talented player left. I guess there's some chance that we'll be able to sign him for less than that bonus demand. I think it's pretty unlikely. I'm hoping that a Humphrey, a Bracamonte, or a Zubiate, and quite honestly, really more a Bracamonte or a Humphrey fall to us in the fourth round. I think that we're probably getting greedy thinking that either of them will be around then. But we are going to go ahead and draft Ishmael Vasquez, the center fielder. And Humphrey and Bracamonte are still both here in the fourth round. Interesting. And now they're telling us we should take Desta Kawanda, shortstop. Solid defensive shortstop. Never going to hit all that much. Like the durability. But I'm more interested in Humphrey or Bracamonte. And we haven't taken a pitcher yet, so I think I'm going to go with Bracamonte. He should have 3 pitches, really good forkball and knuckle curve mixed in with an average fastball. He's durable. He's a lefty. The issue is his stamina. In a best case scenario, is probably kind of a 5-inning starter, but a lot of guys at the major league level are 5-inning starters at this point. Really like the stuff, acceptable movement, and the fact that he's already throwing in the mid-90s as an 18-year-old. So we're going to go ahead and pick Danny Bracamonte here in the fourth round. And Jaden Humphrey is still around in the fifth round. I'm assuming that's who Travis Lee. Now, Travis Lee is going to the other starting pitcher who's around, Alex Zubiate, who's really a reliever. His bonus demand is not unreasonable. but that movement, I think, is always going to be a problem. I think we're going to pick Humphrey now. We've been looking at the guy for a long time. We're in the 5th round now. He's still out there. We may not be able to sign all these guys because some of them are looking for crazy money, particularly relative to where they're being picked now. But we're going to take a shot on Humphrey. And over the last week or so, we've been working on getting most of our draftees signed. Still waiting to hear back from number 1 pick Jonathan Ojeda. And then Ishmael Vasquez is obviously the guy that a lot depends on, our 3rd round pick, who's looking for $6.5 million. His slot was $840,000. We only offered him $1 million. So he's probably going to reject that, and then we're going to have some decisions to make. But more important than those decisions right now is the fact that we just had a pretty significant injury. Bobby Witt Jr. out for about 4 weeks with knee tendinitis. So that's not optimal. When we look at the standings, though, we're up 6 on the Guardians, and the Angels have been closing on us. We're only up a game on the Angels for the best record in the American League and the best record in baseball. So not an optimal time to be losing Bobby Witt Jr., but the only positive is that it will guarantee that the likes of Flores and Laziosi and Alvarado all kind of in the lineup on an everyday basis, with the fact that we do have an opening at third base now. So I guess that's called looking at an injury through rose-colored glasses, but 5.3 WAR for Bobby Witt Jr. this year. So he was definitely on pace to be in contention for a Most Valuable Player award again. Unfortunately, this will probably end any hope of that happening. And good news, our first round pick, Jonathan Ojeda, is signed. Not surprisingly, Ishmael Vasquez did not go for the offer that was about $5.5 million less than he was looking for that we gave to him. You can see, unfortunately, Ojeda's already had one at-bat in rookie ball, but that's going to be the extent of his rookie experience. We're going to try to run him through the different levels, I think, really quickly. So we're going to promote him to Class A, and we are going to force start him as a first baseman everywhere he goes. Honestly, his bat is ready. The issue is that he's not really ready to play in the field anywhere. So I think near term we want to get him up the curve on first base a little bit, and then we can give him a little time in left and right field. But we're probably going to spend, if he's hitting well, I don't think he's going to spend more than 2 weeks at any level. Move him up hopefully by early August to high A ball, by mid-August to double A ball, and then by the end of August, early September, move him up to triple A for a couple games. And if everything goes well, maybe he ends up on the major league roster when we get to roster expansion. And going back to the draftees, we've only got budget room of $3.7 million right now. So Jaden Humphrey, the catcher that we had talked a lot about, who we picked at the end of the 5th round, and then Cody Williams, who we got in the 8th round, decent center field prospect, are 2 guys that we can get signed. I think I'm going to try to get those 2 signed. And then if we do open up some money as we get closer to the trade deadline, which is really just a week and a half away at this point, that may give us a little more money to consider offering to Vasquez. Otherwise, we'll offer Vasquez as much as we can with what's left over. I think it's likely that he goes to college and we just get a replacement pick next year, but we kind of knew there was a pretty high probability of that happening going in. And it's now Monday, July 24th, so we've got a week left till the trade deadline. Checking in on the standings here. Up by 8 in the division, and we're up by 2 on the Angels for the best record in baseball. So 1-4 in a row. Things are going well. Alex Vasquez, 3rd in the league in hitting. Victor Avelar, the rookie, still holding on to the league lead in runs batted in. Vasquez third in OPS. Bobby Witt Jr. second in WAR, but he'll be dropping there most likely, given that he's still out for another 3 to 4 weeks. As far as the pitching staff, All-Star Ben Borgman leading in ERA, tied for the league lead in wins, and second in pitcher WAR. So Borgman's making a push to potentially be involved in the Cy Young Award voting this season. So season's still going real well for the Royals. Taking a look at the team stats, back to being first in the league in runs scored, and we are second in the league in runs allowed, and both our starter and bullpen ERA are second. So we don't have any huge pressing needs. I still don't love our bullpen. Real happy with the pitching rotation. Brule's been really good. Dabovich effective as always. Gore's been excellent. Graceffo's had a disastrous year. Zach Green's been pretty mediocre as a Rule 5 acquisition. Lesko good. Williams getting better, bouncing back from a slow start. And then Hubbard's been solid as our closer. So I feel like Graceffo and Green are the guys that we want to move on from. Green, we can just send back. He's a Rule 5 pick making $1.1 million. That's an easy departure. Graceffo is the perhaps more important one, though, because we do open up $10 million this year if we move on from him. Now, we miss out on the fact that we signed him for that cheap extension for $4 million next year. But if there's a market for him, it might be the right thing to do. I tend to think it's not going to free up enough money so that we're going to really be able to go full force after all of our signees. We probably still can't get Ishmael Vasquez signed, even if we do open up, less than half of his money, because we're less than halfway through the year. The other thing I'm looking at now is it seems like we have finally reached the breaking point with ticket prices. We're still, selling out 90% of the stadium, but when we got up here to $40, that seemed to be seems to be the limit here in Kansas City. You can see that although our ticket price is up 9.8%, our revenue per game is only up 7.6% as we're starting to have more empty seats. The hope is that that'll turn around a little bit, but I think that we may have found just about the distance that we can push ticket prices, because we're definitely on track to have probably the lowest attendance year that we've had basically since we took over the team, with the fact that we've had a lot of empty seats for the last month or so. And taking a look at the trading block, you can see there's a lot of pretty decent quality pitchers potentially out there. Our issue is going to be how much we can get people to retain, because right now we basically need them to retain all of their salary. And Fernando Tatis Jr., perennial MVP award winner, looks like he may finally be getting a little older here at age 35, hitting just 262 this year with only 25 home runs through 99 games played. He's only on pace to hit about 38, 39 home runs. But when you look at what Tatis Jr. has done over the course of his career, that actually is a pretty big drop off what he's doing this season. Only a 145 OPS plus and 139 WRC plus, as opposed to the 185 and 181 he's put up over the course of his career. So would obviously be a real interesting bat to bring on. I can't imagine that he doesn't even want to come to Kansas City. So I didn't think we'd be able to put together a package anyways, but thought it would be interesting just to see exactly what they're looking for the 35-year-old. We don't have any huge holes. As we've talked about, I like our outfield. I like our infield. Our catchers are fine. So I think I'm going to spend most of my time investigating whether there might be a trade to make for some pitchers. And after looking through the pitchers, there's no one who's just an incredible shutdown pitcher available. So we're basically going to be looking for someone we can get cheap, whose team is willing to either take a contract in return or retain basically all of their contract. No real difference makers, but we're still going to try to put something together to maybe improve our bullpen on the margins over these final weeks, this final week of July. And we decided to just check in on Gordon Graceffo's trade value, and it's pretty non-existent. We can get back old pitchers making lots of money, or old pitchers who are hurt and making moderate levels of money for him. So nothing all that exciting for Graceffo as we try to potentially get that contract off of the roster here in the next couple of days. And we've got a deal together that I think helps us on the margin. We can get Matt Allan from the Padres, 33-year-old. He wants to be a starting pitcher. I think he's going to end up being in our bullpen. Maybe he could take over as fifth starter for Bosma. He's fragile, good work ethic. Over the course of his career, he's been basically a completely average major league pitcher. Was an all-star once last season. But I think he's a little higher quality than the back end of our bullpen right now and gives us a little bit of insurance if we happen to get hit with a rash of injuries to our starting pitchers. And they'll also throw in a reliever, Andrew Bonds, who's been in Double-A the last couple years. Looks like he could be an arm at the back end of a major league rotation, but not that exciting. We do have to give up a decent prospect. We picked James Sanders in the third round back in 2030. Good personality, good work ethic. The issue with him is that I drafted him as a left-handed starter, and he still profiles as he could be an average-ish major league starter, but he's going to have to develop the curveball to avoid being a reliever. And he's only gotten that curveball up to 30, to a 30 level over the past 3+ years pitching in our minor league system, and he's only gotten up to A-ball where he has a 4.09 ERA this year. So I don't view Sanders as being a big part of our future. So from that perspective, I think being able to bring on Allen as well as a arm Bonds that hopefully we won't need this year, but could be a 7th or 8th arm out of the bullpen down the line. I think it makes sense for us to do that trade because I just don't think Sanders is going to develop the way that we had hoped when we drafted him. So we're going to go ahead, bring on Matt Allan. Positively, that helped with the fan reaction, which maybe will give us a little boost here. Yeah, it gave us a nice boost in fan interest. Maybe that'll help in attendance a little bit. But as I said, a little concerned that we've pushed the envelope too far with our ticket prices. So having Allen on board now means that we can look to move on from Graceffo and or Zach Green. I looked at the market for Graceffo. It was not all that exciting. I can't imagine that Zach Green's market is going to be all that robust either. There's actually a more robust market for Zach Green than there is for Graceffo. I don't really see anyone who's going to be an impact player for us. I mean, Jack Fecco could be a back end of the rotation arm for us. Arbitration eligible. I don't know that he's really that much better than Zach Green. So I think we might try to get something, although we're not going to get much for Graceffo. We've already seen that. What if we shot both Green and Graceffo? Can we get anything there? Still just a bunch of old guys. Our old buddy Hayden Wesneski. Got him from the Yankees when we traded Sal Perez in the first year of this playthrough back in 2022. What's going on with Hayden's career? He's been an average-ish major league pitcher over the course of his career. Had that one all-star appearance with us back in 2026. And I just realized that I still had us asking just for pitchers from back when we went shopping for a pitcher in the off season. So I'm going to just see what we can get for Graceffo in terms of all players now. Maybe there's a little more versatility. Boy, if somebody offers us, there's actually a lot of options out there for Graceffo now. I can't imagine any of them are going to be incredibly attractive, but we'll take a look. In taking a look at this, even if we traded away Graceffo, you can see our available money is still going to be minus $9.1 million. So going through and starting that charity, messed up our money to the point where we're just not going to be able to release enough money to be able to sign Ishmael Vasquez, which we thought was possible when we picked him up. But it also means we don't really need to dump Graceffo. I think I want to keep Graceffo around because they're as bad as he looks right now. I think there could be some value with that contract for next year as a back-end starter. So I think that means that we're going to move on from Zach Green, and we can just send him right back to the Dodgers. But I'll try to get something for him. I haven't thought that seriously about it. I did see that there were some offers last time. Again, it was just looking at pitchers, so we'll see if there's any players at all that we can pick up for him. And there were a lot of players out there for him, as I mentioned. I think we're going to go with Arturo Rivas from the Yankees. They offered us a 24-year-old left fielder. Given that we've got so many corner outfielders right now, we're going to send him right to AAA, I think. But he does still have an option year left. I think we're at least getting something for him. Hopefully it doesn't come back to haunt us in the playoffs. But rather than just cutting him outright, I think picking up Rivas for him makes sense. We'll see if maybe we can get a little bit more from the Yankees. Maybe they've got some cash too. Most teams don't seem to have any cash at this point. Yeah, the Yankees don't either. And no one's got any cash at this point in the playthrough, unfortunately. I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to get more. We were going to just send him back for free anyways. I guess maybe we should send him back to the Dodgers rather than send him to a team that we could be playing in the playoffs in the Yankees. But like the idea of bringing on Rivas is some depth, and that will allow us to open up a spot on the 26-man roster so we can finally move Allen onto the roster. Rivas we will put onto the 40-man and then send him to Omaha. And it looks like Matt Allen is actually going to go into the closer role. I thought there was some chance that we would put him into the 5th spot in the rotation and move Tyler Bosma back into the closer role. But Bosma, who closed for us at the beginning of the year, is now our 5th starter. Bryce Hubbart, who's closed for us for the last couple of months, is now our setup man. And new addition Matt Allen is now our closer for the rest of the way this season. Hopefully he can help us out down the stretch. And I don't know that we're going to do too much else before the trade deadline. We've got another week, so we can sim ahead another week. Hopefully we don't have any other significant injuries. Bobby Witt Jr. is certainly significant enough, but unless we have some shocking, serious injuries, I think we're kind of done with what we're going to do this trade deadline. And we will keep you posted on the pending meteoric rise of first-round draft choice Jonathan Ojeda through the organization. He's played in 3 games in Class A ball now, 4 for 8 with 3 walks. So his OPS plus is 221, WRC plus 243. So we will move him, and obviously it says he's ready for much more than that. Just moving him to high A for a couple days isn't going to excite people much. He still can be at a higher level than that, but just going to keep kind of giving him a little more time to hopefully keep working on his skills at first base. And who knows, he could be someone who's contributing at the major league level pretty soon. And the Royals are rapidly getting banged up here. Alex Vasquez out with a day-to-day injury, strained back. minimal impact on hitting and throwing, but a moderate impact on his running. It's going to impact him for a week. I think we're just going to be ultra cautious and throw him right onto the 10-day IL. And part of the reason that we're going to be able to do that is that, as you know, Mike McNeil has been raking in AAA, 360 batting average with 22 homers and 344 at-bats. Was going to wait a while longer, but now with Vasquez gone on the IL for the rest of this week, or for 10 days at this point, we can definitely bring McNeil up, and he's going to slide right in somewhere. I'm guessing he'll probably be playing left field over Dylan Cruz, and Cruz will remain the DH. But let's see. Yeah, Mike McNeil slotting into the lineup, batting third against both lefties and righties, and playing left field, making his major league debut. And Victor Avelar, who came up earlier this year and has been leading the American League in ribbies most of the season, is our cleanup hitter and right fielder. So then you look at Velasquez. Velasquez was a rookie a few years ago. Laziosi, a rookie last year. Bolden, a rookie a few years ago. Alvarado, a rookie last year. Fonseca, a rookie last year. Flores, a rookie last year. Dylan Cruz is kind of the only veteran in our lineup right now. Now, obviously, when Vasquez and Bobby Witt Jr. come back, that will change. But the amount of young talent on these Royals is just out of control right now. So get to see what McNeil will do, which will be really good. But a streak that we have taken a lot of pride in is also going to come to an end. Caleb Lagerwell, out with rotator cuff tendonitis for 3 to 4 weeks. He has been the definition of durability throughout his career. You can see he started 33 games for us 7 straight years, 31 his first year with the team, 32 when he was a 20-year-old in Miami, and still started 16 games as a 21-year-old when they first brought him up. So his streak of just incredible health and just kind of going out and pitching a ton for us is going to come to an end. Hopefully it doesn't develop into a bigger issue. You know, we should have him back before the end of August. So not a huge issue. 11-8 this year with a 4.09 ERA, which is the highest he's ever been since his rookie year. So it hasn't been a vintage Lagerwell season, but you look at his profile and you still think he's going to do pretty well for us. So Lagerwell is going to go on the IL, and that will make an interesting choice. So we've obviously got to bring up another pitcher, but will be very interesting to see then if Allen, Hubbard, or someone else goes into the rotation. And we're going to give our AAA closer, Ramon Perez, a second chance at pitching in the majors. He was up earlier this year, just very briefly, pitched only 3 games with a 4.26 ERA, but he doesn't really have much left to prove in Omaha. Put up a 2.87 ERA with 38 strikeouts over 31 and a third innings pitched. So we'll put Perez onto the team and then see what Bobby Crosby wants to do. And he's going to follow in what Byron Nichols used to do and go with the whole follower thing with Bryce Hubbard as the number 5 guy in the rotation. So Allen stays in as our closer for the time being. Bob Williams promoted up to that setup role. And we'll see if we can piece things together for the next month or so without Caleb Lagerwell in the rotation for the first time in about a decade. So we've simmed ahead another week to the trade deadline. No new major injuries. Do get the catcher Jaden Humphrey and the center fielder Cody Williams signed. And Ojeda continues his attack on the lower levels of the minors with 3 home runs in a game this week down in high A ball. So you can see he's only played 2 games there so far, 3 hits, 3 homers, 6 ribbies. We're going to keep him down I guess, although he has moved up a notch in first base. I just don't see. I feel like this guy is like the most popular college baseball player in history. And we're just like doing this thing where we're parading him through our minor league system on his way up to the majors as he kind of learns how to play a little better defensively before we have to have him out there every day. So checking in on the injury situation, Vasquez should be back from that strained back shortly. Another 1 day of injury. He is on for 4 more days. And Bobby Witt Jr. and Caleb Lagerwell both have about 2 to 3 weeks left. Dylan Lesko dealing with a tender shoulder for 4 days, which is not optimal. I think I want to just bench him for those 4 days. We'll go with a shorter staff, but can't really afford any more significant injuries. Just check in on what Mike McNeil's done his first week. Finding it a little harder going at the major league level. 4 for 23, no home runs, driven in just 1 run. Obviously a real small sample size, but that was a pretty meteoric rise for the majors for him too. Basically barely over 2 years from when we picked him in the first round. He's making his major league debut. So given that the injury situation hasn't gotten worse over the last week, I think we're going to hold tight. We're 69-40. Up by 5 games on the Guardians. We have gotten passed by the Angels for the best record in baseball and the best record in the American League. They're a game ahead of us. So that's not optimal, but I didn't love the options that were kind of out and available. And clearly, if we were able to, make a move to bring on Fernando Tatis Jr., that would obviously be huge, but there was, that's right. I didn't even get to see what we'd be able to offer because he still is vetoing a trade to us. I thought they were just asking for something stupid, and obviously with our financial situation, we would have need them to retain his entire salary. But it's just not an option because he doesn't want to leave San Diego, where he spent his whole career, for Kansas City. So that's going to be it for us. We're not going to do anything else at this trade deadline. And so we've made it into August. Here on August 1st, as we talked about, 5-game lead over the Guardians. And we now are a game and a half behind the Angels, as I guess they played yesterday on the trade deadline and we did not. So we'll see whether we can get past the Angels to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. At the very least, we want to make sure that we've got a first round bye. The key to that is going to be just hanging on to the division title and holding off the Guardians, because we're 5 games up on them. You look at the other potential division winner in the Yankees, and we're up looks like 10.5 games on them. So as long as we can win the AL Central, we should have a first round bye in the playoffs. Obviously the preference would be to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs, but that may not be the case. We'll see what happens over the last month and a half, 2 months of the season in our next episode. Just checking in on some of the leaders. Vasquez still 3rd in the AL batting race. The rookie Victor Avelar is now 2nd in runs batted in. Vasquez 3rd in OPS. Bobby Witt Jr. hanging on to 2nd in batter war. Like I said, I think he had a real shot at finally winning an MVP this year if he hadn't had his season fractured by this knee tendonitis. Borgman still leading the league in ERA, 2nd in the league in wins, and 2nd in the league in pitcher war. So would expect that both Bobby Witt Jr. and Alex Vasquez to get some MVP votes this year. Victor Avelar, probably some MVP votes, and pretty hard to imagine that he won't be the Rookie of the Year. and probably going to be seeing some Cy Young Award votes for Ben Borgman, but there's obviously still 2 months for things to change. And we will focus on these last couple months of the 2034 season in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.